Working.
Oh, Thor, are you here?
I saw a message saying that his thing's still not working.
Okay. Do we have live chat too? I think we can do that.
Yeah, you can type in the message board on the side.
Okay. Um, Trying to see where the chat is. There it is. Okay. Make sure I put it in. Okay. Um, so really quickly, just to do a brief overview of this week's case study. It's on following Lance Armstrong and his cycling career and the corruption that um, occurred all throughout it, and in using enhanced drugs in order to have higher performances, and how he was able to get away with it, not just get away with it, but pay off people, and had his whole team involved in this process of doping their systems in order to get better results. And in the end, as the accusations were being made, how he still would not own up to it, even though multiple team members came out and spoke against him. But when the full federal case or went to court, he still, even up to that point, was refusing that he'd ever doped. And it wasn't until an interview with Oprah Winfrey where he came clean. And so in this particular case study, we are following not just what he's done, but then also how we're doing the how you will measure in your life, and how we would want to create a strategy for our life and how we allocate our resources. And anyhow, so with that, we'll go ahead and open. um, Clint, thank you for saying the prayer. I appreciate that. And let's really quickly, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, I think just 7 topic points today to go over, but I think it'll take up most of the time. So the first question is what is Armstrong's legacy? What legacy do you think he has left behind, um, for his family, for the legacy that he will be known for throughout history?
Um, well, it's showing that his legacy now is like he's going to be known forever as the biggest cheater in all of athletics and history.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because I
Yeah.
still really have a huge respect for that man, but still, like, what he did was wrong, and just the way he covered up everything was just insane. And yeah, it just goes to show that it can go a long ways with bribing people and with money. And so, yeah, he's known as one being the biggest cheater in all of history and sports. That's just kind of his legacy, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the other side of things, you could also run into, I feel like, the other half of the people that still don't even know about. Like, the people that don't even know much about sports probably didn't follow the accusations that he's gone through. So I feel like the other half actually still believes that he's like a true champion. So I'd be interested to hear what other people think, and if they know about all the accusations and things that he's done. But he's definitely, to the real sports world that know, then he's known as one of the bigger cheaters.
Did you guys know about this prior to reading? Did you understand or know the full effect of what was going on behind the scenes?
I I didn't. That's why I said that. I feel like there's another half.
Yeah. I didn't either. I've always had a high respect for him, in battling cancer and being able to get back up on the cycle and compete. And I knew accusations had been made against him, but I didn't follow those. I tend to kind of I feel like the press always exaggerates so much that I tend to not really pay a whole lot of attention when all the accusations start coming out. Um, and then to read this case study, it was just, almost broke my heart because I've always had such great respect for him. And I thought, oh, look what drugs do to you. Look what they can do to even the greatest of champions, because what a fall to have to take. So, and not just Armstrong. I felt the same way about Hamilton. I thought he was a great athlete and followed his career for a while. And to hear his story was also really hard for me to read this week. So, anyhow, Thor, did you want to add anything in the chat? I don't see anything. Does anyone else? Because I'm
He's typing right now. Or he's typing.
okay. I can't see.
He just said, I totally agree with you guys.
All right, you guys might have to jump in and help me if he says something, because on my group chat, I'm not seeing anything.
Okay.
Yeah, no, he's there.
Okay, cool. All right, the next question is, Armstrong organized and led what was perhaps the most sophisticated and comprehensive cheating program in the history of sports. Who suffered from his cheating and what were the costs? For me on this one, I felt like, it sounded like it was pretty sophisticated and comprehensive, but as I read on, I also felt like, wow, to be titled with that's pretty a grand accusation, but it sounded like to me that the whole cycling environment, it was just part of what they did. And so that was really hard. I imagine entering into a sport that you love and then finding out that that's how it is, and you get set in your ways. That had to have been really difficult. But I think he took it a little bit farther when he began organizing with, is it Dr. Ferrari? Is that who it was?
Yeah.
The scientist who was able to, try and cheat the system even further by not being able to detect the transfusions. And so I think that's where he starts. That not starts, but I think that's when it really took a turn, because this drive for him to win, this need for him to have the wins under his belt became so extreme. He was willing to do almost anything. And I think the hardest thing are the people who supported him this whole time, and that he gave so much hope to, especially the cancer community, in who he became this beacon of hope that you could do anything. I think what a harsh letdown to see someone that you admire and fight so hard to have done it the wrong way in order to win. So I think the cancer community certainly took a huge hit, but I also think the American people did, because the first or the only other guy who has won the race, what was his name again? I can't remember. Greg LeMond. He did it without using drugs, and he was so disgusted by how the program had turned. But he was the only other American who's ever run the race. And now Lance Armstrong, who had taken the 7 victories, had to surrender all of those titles, but it tarnished the United States reputation in the sports world for using drugs. And unfortunately, I think that will hang over the American people every time they compete in different sports, is that we'll constantly be challenged on whether or not it was done legally and correctly. But what do you think?
mean, it's kind of hard to figure out like who lost in it, because there are all sorts of positives and negatives to each side. Kind of like with Lance Armstrong, without it, he probably wouldn't have been so popular. And so even though he lost all his titles, and then he was still kind of known, and he did raise over 380 million for his cancer foundation that wouldn't have been able to done otherwise, which I think is just in that element itself is good. But obviously didn't need to cheat. But yeah, but also I think just American people, I agree with you, I didn't think about that, but I think us as Americans, I think we lost out on just the people's trust, especially the Americans now are just, it's going to take a long time to rebuild that trust. So,
I agree with Clint.
Yeah. So I'm just curious because you said, he was able to raise so much money for the Cancer Foundation, and that was a
yeah.
good. Do you think that justifies it? I mean, his actions, do you think that justifies it, that it's okay?
No, I mean it's definitely not okay to cheat in anything. Um, but at the same time, like he did go have you know, was it testicular cancer?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, yeah, he lost half of his um, what they call it. It was he lost half of his like pro
It was the testosterone that
yeah,
he lost. It was half of that
yeah,
dropped, which
which
unfortunately decreased
yeah.
the performance value. Yeah.
Um, I mean, so he was, I don't know. This is all like huge, super complicated. I feel like, yeah, you should never do drugs to cheat, but like he was half, he didn't have half of what people had. And so it almost, I don't know.
How do you figure he didn't have half of what other people had?
How do you figure it out?
No, yeah. Well, I mean, you said he didn't have half of what other people had, but are you talking about as far as what he could produce?
Yeah. Wasn't it like because a lot of people after his cancer, like people didn't want him just because they just said, now that you can't produce all that
Well,
testosterone, you probably don't have enough drive or energy to actually compete.
well, that was their assumption before I mean, but they didn't have like test results that said he wouldn't be able to provide. They're just saying, look,
No.
after you lose something like that, you can't come back, or they were afraid he wouldn't be able to come back as strong. But I think that he could have raised just as much money with the cancer community and still have been a huge icon for the American people, even if he had not won that many races. But by just getting back up on the bike and going out and competing and working, I think that he could have done just as much. I don't think he had to do the doping in order to
I don't
to
think he could have
to be
done
a
as
success.
much.
Yeah, I mean,
I
I
think,
guess I don't know. I have so many mixed emotions. It's crazy. But yeah, he should definitely not do drugs to be successful. I mean, even I don't know if you guys watched the video, but um, he even said like he has an undetermining drive to win or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, it was just kind of, I don't know. Yeah, I guess it was wrong, I guess.
Hmm. I'm actually really glad we're talking about it because I have different points of view, so I like hearing the
I
different.
don't I personally don't think he would have done as well for the cancer thing if he had it won, especially that many times. I don't think it would be like a strong enough story for him to get back on the bike and get last place. I don't think people would be so inclined to buy the Livestrong bands. 'Cause it's not as powerful story because he supposedly won 7 consecutive to no one else has done that, and so I think that's a stronger story that you recover from cancer and then you go out and win 7. Like, that's kind of unheard of. I don't think I would even really know who he was if he had never won at least like 2.
And you really don't believe he could have won one?
I don't think so. It
I think
didn't
he
sound
could
like he
have.
could.
I think he could have, just because they talk about how, as a man, prior to cancer, he produced his body functioned better than a athletic man normally does. I mean, the percentages were just astounding at how much better he produced. You know, he was able to use more oxygen. He had greater use of his red blood cells. He had the ability his body didn't hold the chemical in it. I can't think of what it's called, that weakens your muscles when you go long periods of time. And so he was already built to be an athlete. I mean, he's obviously from the very beginning had these advantages that nobody else had. When that was without performance enhancing drugs. I
You
think
think
that
he was the only one that was using performance enhancers though? Because
no,
I feel
no,
like
no, no.
I
I'm
think
just saying
others
that
would have, and they would have outbeat him because they used the
I agree. I
performance
agree. I think the
enhancers.
whole system is really bad. I
Yeah.
don't think that. I mean, I think it almost would be. Um, how would I say it? I think by the sound of it, it almost seems like it's impossible to cycle without using the drugs. I mean,
That's
as
what I was
far
thinking.
as
Yeah.
the races go, it seems like that's what everyone did. But I think he took it to a whole nother level that
Mm.
I understand where someone could become trapped in that. I really appreciated Hamilton's testimony where he talks about how he really wishes he just hadn't taken that red pill, it back in the bottle, and that when he took it, he just went on a downhill spiral from there. And so I understand being on a team and everybody doing it, everybody, including the doctors, including the masseuse, including everybody involved, is saying it's okay. This is part of the sport. I get that, and I get that that would be a problem. I think that my big thing is he seemed to have taken it so much further. Um, and now I don't have all of the other people's stories,
Mm-hmm.
but I just felt like that drive to win, um, and that I, I don't know, to thrive, to be in that spotlight. I don't know what exactly it is that made him drive the way he did, but it seemed to overtake any value system. You know, it
Yeah.
wasn't just taking a testosterone pill or taking a little bit of extra. It was doing I mean, a full gamma of events in order to enhance his performance and his whole team throughout the whole thing. And when I was reading this case study to my husband last night, he goes, "Wow, I can't believe the whole team would do it." And I thought, you know what? How else would they keep up with them? And then as I got farther along in the case study, I'm like, wow. I mean, this was really truly a huge operation to have it go through. But I also believe that, you know, when he started the sport, it was already there. The operation was already set up.
Yeah.
Um, but I think he went too far, you know. And I mean, I personally would hope that I would never accept the dope in the first place. Um, that would be ideal, that everybody would be able to be honest in it. But obviously it wasn't that case in this situation. And to say only he is to be judged for it would be wrong, because it was everybody. But I think that for me, I would have, I don't know. I think he could have still won a race. I mean, Damon did, and he did it without performance drugs, and there were other people who won without performance drugs. So it's possible. It's just, it becomes more and more difficult when you're competing against those that do. So,
do you think that the Lance Armstrong's performances, that they wouldn't come out if he had only won 2? Do you
yes.
think people would care as much?
No, I don't think they would have cared as much. I think he probably could have got away with 3 or 4, possibly even 5. It wasn't until he started hitting the 6th and the 7th one that people were starting to say, hey, something's not right here.
Yeah.
But
I think just reading this case study, for me, it's kind of tarnished every other win, just me personally.
Yeah. Did Thor say anything on the chat? I can't see. Okay. So the next question was, were the other riders, Hamilton, Landis, and those who testified, too loyal to Armstrong or not loyal enough? Any thoughts?
Thor said, I think they did what was right, but should have done it sooner. Or I think they did what was right, but should have done it sooner.
I agree.
I think he's typing some more. Hold on. Oh, maybe not. Never mind. Yeah, I think it was just that he sent.
Okay. Anyone else want to add to that?
What was the question again?
Were the other riders, Hamilton, Landis, or those who testified, too loyal to Armstrong or not loyal enough?
They were pretty loyal to him, I felt like.
I did too. I mean, they rode for years with him.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just a short period of time. They rode for years with him. It wasn't until, like Hamilton, it was when he started, his performance started challenging Armstrong, that Armstrong reached, started making accusations against him, and that's when he finally opened up and testified against him. Landis, I'm not quite sure what caused him to open up and testify. I was trying to go back and double check here. Because he had quite a few things that he opened up, but it was still over several years. It wasn't until 2010. And he had started in 2002, so 8 years with them. But anything else on that one? We're bouncing on. Moving to the next. Okay, think about a situation where you witnessed a leader, formal or informal, make a decision for others that made you uncomfortable. What was that situation and how did you feel about it?
Trying to think if I've ever been in a workplace where somebody's done that.
I know I shared before one of the situations with my husband, with one of the jobs he was at. So I didn't specifically experience it, but I definitely did through my husband, um, where the management would come in the end of the year and they wanted him to alter the numbers. So he was over uh, a shipping department, and he was also over all of the reporting for the company. And so they would say, we want it to look good and we want our numbers to be positive. So say that you shipped this, and this, and that all of these made it on time, even though the products had not even been built yet. Orders had been placed, but the products hadn't even been built. And so my husband would say, no, no, that's wrong. And on multiple occasions, they would come to him and they would say, look, you have to do this. You have to do this. And unfortunately, when my husband was first hired onto the company, they had done a reorganization completely where corporate headquarters had come down and fired all of upper management because they had doctored the reports. And so they had brought in all these new people. And my husband would get so frustrated. He's like, they saw what happened. They saw what happened when you do this, and that they're not changing their ways. And he kind of stood his ground, refused to do it. And they said, well, if you don't do it, we'll put you on suspension with no pay. My husband's like, fine. I'm not going to, I can't do that ethically, morally. I'm not going to do that. And he wanted to walk away from the company. And I asked him to please hang on for another 3 weeks because I was due to have a baby and I was terrified of losing insurance. And so due to my selfishness, he stuck around. But he saw so much happen within those next few weeks of the company where things were completely doctored and changed. And it just, he said he felt like he worked for a dirty company, and it was really, really hard on him. And when we ended up leaving the company, it was really ugly. It was really ugly. We had filed against them and everything because of what was going on. And eventually the company did end up taking a huge hit and falling, um, closing down. But at least not corporately, but that plant. But we saw how it affected our family and our immediate situation. But my husband said there are good people in that company who are affected by the decisions of the management, and they have really limited say in what can and cannot be done. So if the managers choose to be corrupt and choose to follow or break laws, it affects everybody in the company. When they shut it down, it closed down a plant of 2,100 people, and it wasn't all of them who made those choices. It was management who made those choices. And so unfortunately, when you make a decision like this where you decide to take the wrong path and you are the leader, you take your team with you. And that can be really difficult. So that's my only experience, I think, where I've seen a leader make this type of decision that was just really hard on everybody. Does anyone else have an experience?
That sounds pretty wild. I'm still trying to think of one, but man, that sounds pretty crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, I don't have anything. I've worked for fairly good companies, so.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something and I can't.
Well, what if we gave it a little twist? We can look at our political leaders. I mean, we've witnessed leaders make formal decisions that affect everybody. Have you seen any decisions they made that have made you feel uncomfortable and how you would feel about it? I mean,
Um, Yeah, I guess the gay rights movement, I mean, that's a really sensitive topic now, but it still makes me uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it just makes me think what the world's doing, you know? I don't know. I just feel like everybody just wants to feel like they need a voice out there, so they come up with all these crazy things, and now everyone can get married if or gay people can get married now, and I know in different states now that they're pushing for abortion, and some have already passed through abortion. I don't know. It's just I don't know, very different.
Yeah.
Mm.
Anything else?
I know that my dad um, knows this one guy he's a really rich Frenchman that he's done a few like lucrative deals. He's he was one time was he was in the arms he was an arms dealer, but he would deal illegally to different countries under like under the French government. The French government didn't know, and so he kind of built all these millions of dollars for himself, and then he only went to jail for like 2 years, and he was able to keep the money. And so it's almost kind of like the Lance Armstrong thing that he did everything like under the belt for himself to become this successful person, and only got really a slap on the hand.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I can
Okay.
think of.
Oh, that's a good example. Okay. Um, the next question is, think about a situation you witnessed. I'm sorry, just a second. Think about a situation where you witnessed talented followers follow a leader into an uncomfortable or bad zone. What was the situation? What were the results? And did anyone object? I think that kind of goes hand in hand with what we just talked about. But does anyone want to add to it, or? I mean, with
Um,
my scenario, my husband objected and he was suspended. Suspended without, well, he had to still work, but he did not get paid for like the whole holiday season. Um, and I think it made everybody uncomfortable. But do you guys think that goes hand in hand with the one we discussed previously, or do you want to elaborate anymore?
I think there's aspect of the gospel too. Like I know there's a lot of girls that I know that date these guys that seem good, but all of a sudden they have some background history and current history that they're either doing drugs or alcohol, which these girls before haven't really got involved in any of that until they really started getting emotionally attached to this guy, and so these guys seem to always lure these girls into participating with them until it gets too far and they have to either leave or think.
That's a little scary to me. I have a daughter that's just turned dating age, and
Yeah,
sometimes her choices and who she likes to hang out with is one of those sensitive lines for my husband and I. So,
yeah, it's kind of scary.
but it's kind of, where it goes here, do you object? What were the results? How do you feel about it? And, with us and her situation, we just, we reinforce what our rules are, and we make sure that we are there every single time she comes home, and that she knows that we're up and waiting for her, because we want to talk about it. We want to hear how it was. Regardless if we've not been happy who she goes out with, we still want to hear about her date, because we feel like if we leave those open communication lines, that she'll come to us. And we had one situation where the guy was extremely immature and manipulative, and my husband and I both saw it, but she just couldn't see it. And I think because we had that open door policy where we were kept talking with her and meeting with her each night, one day she came home and she'd realized that this relationship was not worth pursuing even as a friendship because of, he had decided to try something and, on their date. And she said, Mom, I feel like he just got me there so he could mess with my head and, get to me. And I was like, I'm really glad you saw that. but but there's not really, it's as an outside person, I don't get to control her decisions. But I think it's really important that you do voice when you're uncomfortable about something, regardless of the situation. I think it's really important that you know what your values are what they are, and that you establish them and go over them regularly. I think that's part of the gospel. That's why they teach to have family home evening lessons, and why you're supposed to go to church, and why the gospel is an active part of your life and not just you go on Sunday. Because when situations do arise that are hard, that are really difficult, like Lance Armstrong, if you were to join his team, that you would be able to know yourself and know what you are okay with, to be able to say, you know what, I can't perform on this team. Or if you are okay with it, that you can live with the consequences. That's a little off topic, but kind of together at the same time.
That's good.
How's Thor? Has he said anything?
I haven't seen anything yet.
Okay. If you guys just wouldn't mind jumping in if he does, because I can't say anything. Okay, the next question is, what basic principles guide your integrity? Are there times there is a gray area, and how do you choose correctly? I think the basic principles that guide my integrity are the 10 Commandments. I really strive to understand what each of them are, and not just the words, but the reasons behind them. And I think that understanding an eternal perspective helps me when it comes down to making those decisions that are integrity based. I do believe that there are areas that appear gray, that it's very difficult to make the decision because it might look like both decisions could be right. And so for me, when I enter those times or those decisions, that's when I really have to take it to the Lord. And I really have to ask which way to go. Because I know that if I get a feeling of peace and comfort when I move forward with a decision, then I don't regret anything about it. But if I go walk into a decision with doubt, then it's something I can continually look back on and go, what if, what if? And I think I take out that what if factor when I take it to the Lord.
I agree. Thor actually just responded. He said, I think going back to core principles is a good way to go.
I agree.
I agree too. I think the core principles is really like a foundation. I feel like, especially with like integrity, you got to stick to those core principles, because even if you mess up a little bit, then the whole thing could just collapse, and then you find yourself in a really bad situation, just like Lance Armstrong. And I feel like, you just have to just stick to those core principles in order to make sure that what you do in life is going to be a blessing instead of just shady.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else want to add to that?
What was the question again?
What basic principles guide your integrity? Are there times when there's a gray area, and how do you choose correctly?
I think what kind of guides me is um, having the thought of like the simple phrase of what would Jesus do, or even having the thought of my own mother. Like, I would not want to betray or do something in front of my own mom or God that they would be unpleased. And so that's kind of my guiding principle. That
I love that. I love that. As a mother, I have to say, I love that. I hope my kids can do that one day.
yeah. And so you can, because like, so there's a lot of times where I feel like you can't really hide it. And so I think just being true to yourself and not being caught up in being the best or being known of the world or being seem famous. I think
Yeah.
as long as you don't do those things, then I think you should be all right.
I can't imagine the amount of pain that I think I would feel if I had to stand before Christ and say, this is how I lived my life, and but look, I made a lot of money, and I did do a lot of good. I helped raise millions of dollars. I helped do this. I inspired millions of people. I think it's justified. I I don't know that I could do that. Now that is not meant in any way, please, to judge Lance Armstrong, because I am not him and I've never been in his shoes. So his challenges are not mine. Um, However, I think when living by our guiding principles, one of the things that I look at is when I have to stand before Christ, am I okay with the decisions I made? Can I really own them and feel good about them? And for me, that's huge. There have been many times in my life where I had to make a decision where I, for example, I was engaged to a man that I loved. I loved him and I, thought we were going to be married for all eternity. And I took it to the Lord and something didn't feel right and I didn't know why. And it was really hard because I didn't understand why I shouldn't be. And it wasn't until about 6 months later, I broke off the engagement. It wasn't until about 6 months later that things came out about this gentleman that I realized would have destroyed me. I would have gone down a path that, I think I would have followed him out of love and not realized I was in danger until it was too late. And so I think that, part of it is we have to have that relationship with Christ. And I do tie the gospel a lot into my decisions that I make. I feel I have a huge responsibility on my shoulders constantly because I do have a large family. And each of my children, I have a responsibility to teach. And if I try and just do it off of my own knowledge, I'm not gonna make it. And so any decision I make, whether it's regarding my family or my education or school, whatever it may, or business, whatever it may be, I think it's really critical that I involve the Lord in it. And when I do that, it helps me when it comes down to making those decisions to say, what would he want me to do? If I stood before him, I got the answer. Am I okay with what I chose? I feel confident that um, those decisions that I'm making are really for the best for the people around me, not just what's best for me, but for everybody surrounding me, so that that I'm being guided the right way. And I know that might be a little off for a business class, but I really do think that if we, as members of the church, live the gospel, it's fully integrated with every decision that we make. So, the last question, and then we're done, is how will you personally measure your life? How will you measure success? And
money and fame.
Money and fame.
Just kidding.
You're funny.
Honestly, I think I measure my life. I think I'll continue on measuring it is by the service I do to others, and I feel like I measure my life by the gratitude I have throughout each day. I think that's how I'm gonna measure my life. Continue on, just trying to be grateful and just think of the things that I want, but I already have, which will make me more grateful for the things I have. That includes service to my own family and those around me. So yeah.
That's a great way to measure it. It's really great. Austin or Thor, do you have anything to add?
I don't know. I just in life, I guess I just want to be known as somebody who's been always willing to help others. I mean, I know there's many ways of doing that, but um, I don't know. I just also integrity. You just want somebody to know that they can always trust you, even if it's like one of those um, situations where it would just be very difficult to trust somebody in a financial spot. I just want somebody to know that, like, if they see me, they know that I'm not going to do anything shady. That it's just always for the good, kind of a thing. I don't know. I just want them to see me as a good person.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. I like that.
Thor's typing right now, so.
Okay.
He said, I would like to measure success from the good impact I have had in the lives of others. That's kind of like what we've all been saying, it seems like.
Yeah. I agree. You guys are good guys. I have to just say. I think I would agree. For me, part of my measuring of success is my I guess I look at my kids and my husband, and I look at whether or not I have taught them correctly. And I know that their choices may not always reflect what I've taught, but I know that I've raised good kids. And that's, to me, is a huge measurement of success. I think every time I have a baptism or priesthood, ordination, I kind of do this happy dance at home in my room and quiet. And my husband laughs at me, but I'm like, yes, like we did it. We got another one, and and it's not. And for us, we don't. Like for our baptisms, we don't tell the kids they're getting baptized. We give them their own Book of Mormon when they turn 7, and we study for a year really diligently with that child and let them make the choice. And I'm fearful one of these days one of my kids are going to say no, they don't want to, and I'll have to honor that. But to me, that's a huge measure of success. I also think there is a measurement of success when it comes down to the world. I think that when you can stand with being debt free, when you can, or only a mortgage, I guess, for some, but I think that when you can live your life within the bounds of what you're capable or what you make, and that you live your life happy with what you have, I think that is also a measurement of success, because you have a level of freedom that you get with that. So I think there's a lot of different ways to measure it, but those are probably the two I'll focus on. So, with that, I think we are done. However, I'm going to really quickly, did you guys notice that next week's discussion is different?
Is it?
Yeah, there was a post out online saying prep for week 10 early, because it's not a regular case study. It is a, let me look it up really quickly. It's a case study conclusion. So I just wanted to let everyone know that it is supposed to be a little different next week, and maybe if we can read the case study early so that we are, the professor recommended meeting early, which we already do, but maybe jump ahead and take a peek at what that case study is so that we're prepared, because it does give us warning that it is different. And anyhow,
Okay.
and then I have in my notes that Clint is for next week, and then that we don't have a meeting the week after. And then it picks back up with Austin. So if anyone needs to change schedules or anything, just let us know. But
Okay.
all right, anyone have to add anything, or are we good to close?
I'm good to close.
All right.
We're good.
Thank you guys for everything. You guys have a great night. I will post this in just a few minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Welcome.